Well, good morning, everybody. Everybody have a great night last night? Excellent. I'd like to give a lot of kudos this morning to Paula Harris for orchestrating this amazing conference, conference. Let's give her a warm welcome, or a warm thank you. Excellent, excellent. We have Grant Cameron, who will be joining us in a couple minutes here via Zoom. And Grant has been a guest here in Laughlin several times. Paula said that she always invites Grant Cameron back because he's graduated to consciousness, which is so important with ufology. I'd like to, first of all, say a couple of quick little notes here. I'd like to say happy birthday to my beautiful wife, Lori. Lori, raise your hand. Lori's been my pillar and my rock through the research and the work that I've done with Paula Harris throughout the years. So thank you so much, Lori, very much. I also like to say happy birthday to Sid Goldberg. Where's Sid? It is his birthday today, too. Sid? Is Sid in the house? Maybe not. Also, happy birthday to Regina Meredith, who will be a guest next year. So happy birthday, Regina, as well. She's amazing. She works with Sid at Gaia. All right, let's talk a little bit about Grant Cameron. Grant Cameron, after experiencing a mental download event on February 26, 2012, Cameron turned his research interests away from the nuts and bolts research to the role of consciousness in the UFO phenomena. This new research has expanded out to possible involvement of extraterrestrials in modern music and in the phenomena of inspirations and downloads in science discoveries, inventions, Nobel Prizes, music, art, books, near-death experiences, meditation, and with the individuals known as savants and prodigies. This research is detailed in two recent books titled The Paranormal World of Music and Inspired, The Paranormal World of Creativity, which is the basis for a new series on Gaia TV. These sightings led to decades of research into the early 1950s, work done by the Canadian government into the flying saucer phenomena. Cameron became the authority on the Canadian government program, and Wilbert B. Smith, who heads it up. This led to an investigation of the role in the UFO cover-up by the former president of Penn State University. Grant Cameron became involved in ufology as the Vietnam War ended in May 1975 with personal sightings of an object which locally became known as Charlie Red Star. The sightings occurred in Carmen, Manitoba, and about 25 miles north of Canada, U.S. border. The story has been optioned for a movie that will be released. Actually, it was already released. So let's give a warm welcome, please, for Grant Cameron. Thank you, Grant.
Good morning, StarworksUSA USA. Thank you, David, for that wonderful introduction. I have my little presentation here. It's Sunday morning. A lot of people may have been up all night with Jacques Vallée partying, so there may be some people who aren't at the very beginning of this presentation, but I have some fireworks at the end, so stick around for the end of it. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about an outline I have for an upcoming book. And it basically is what I learned in almost 47 years of UFO school. I've been in this a long time. The joke is that when I started, I had some hair. It's been a long time. And this is basically what I came up with. And one of the problems I had was when I started doing this, I suddenly realized there was way more than what I had ever thought that I had learned. Most of what I learned has really came down to not much to do with UFOs. I mean, related, but it took me down a path that I never thought in 1975 that I would. So let me go to my screen here. And I want to thank Paula for inviting me here and for all the people that showed up today to watch my lecture. Now, here's my little screen and here's my little start here. Let's go to full screen. And as I said, this is what I learned in UFO school. And basically, I never would have believed that this would happen. That what happened in 1970, if I had a sighting, I had no interest in UFOs. I've been through this a number of times. Just happened to go out there, and I'll actually describe a little bit about how it happened today. But what I would say to sum up, and I've said this almost every lecture I do, almost every interview I do, if you actually know what's going on, this is my summation of the whole 47 years of UFOs. This is the Super Bowl of all stories. It is the World Cup of all stories. It is the biggest story that will ever come down the pike. There's nothing that can come close to this story if you realize what's going on. If you believe that there was just an alien who made a right turn at Zeta Reticuli and got lost and came to the Earth, and he's just looking around and he's trying to figure out what's going on, then it's not that big a story. But what I will point out today is that from my discovery, this is way more than some alien that got lost, and it's much more complex. In fact, I would say that 500 years from now, when people are doing life regressions, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to say, I was there at that time when they did the UFO thing, and they understood all this stuff, and they were so lucky they were there. And the skeptics are going to say, yeah, sure. Yeah. Next, you're going to tell us you're Cleopatra, because a lot of people don't realize that they're in this Super Bowl game. He may be the water boy, he may be the quarterback, but you're playing in the biggest story of all time. The other thing I want to point out before I start here is that what I'm going to talk about today is belief. One of the things I sort of have come to conclusion, it's all belief, whether it's religion, whether it's COVID, whether it's vaccine, whether it's global warming. You can see today that it's belief system versus belief system, that in the end, we really don't know 100% for sure about anything. And that was one of the lessons I was taught, which I will show you what they basically gave to me. And the other thing that I want to sort of point out is that my game that I played was basically curiosity. So a lot of people want to try to make money. I remember a very rich businessman came to me one time who was interested in the UFO thing. And he said, Grant, I got a question for you. I said, how do you make some money at this thing? And basically what it comes down to is it's very hard to make money at this thing. There really is no money. And I've never played it for money. I've always played it for a game, like a chess game, a curiosity thing. I saw this object the second night. When I saw it the second night, when it came right at me and then flew off into the north, I basically said, what the heck's going on? I got to figure out what's going on. And this is the story of what I discovered. The bottom line is, and I was told this a number of times, I've written 3 books on this. I got 2 more books coming out on this. One of the main messages that I was given, because I had a sort of a noetic experience, download experience, whatever you want to call it, in 2012, where my whole career was totally shifted around. And absolutely the number one message they hammered home to me over and over again is everything you think you know is wrong. You think you know, you ignorant, arrogant, and they would go on, and you have no clue what's going on. And so that's the bottom line, that we think that we've got this thing all figured out, and we don't. Max Planck exemplified this. We sort of think that we've got everything all figured out. We just got one more piece of the puzzle to put in there. And Max Planck told the story in 1874 that his professor, his instructor, told him, Joly was the guy's name, said, no point in going into physics. You're wasting your time. We've got it all figured out. That was 1874. And we still have that estimation today, that we've got this thing all figured out, and we've just about got this in the last piece, and then we're going to figure out the UFO thing. And what it came to me is that the world is almost like the universe is creating and getting more complex, and that we can't even keep up to how complex it's getting, that we're not unraveling anything in terms of the way that this thing is increasing in complexity. This thing is very, very complex. When I first started, one of the things I really realized very early on was this idea about UFO sightings. I did the sightings in 1975, 76. I wrote it all. The big publisher who should have published it said to me, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers. And from 1976, I have never really done UFO sightings. I've sort of, followed the stuff, but I've never really used that as my criteria for trying to figure this thing out, because I realized that sightings will tell you that something's going on. They will tell you, yeah, there's something here and we really don't know what's going on. But in terms of figuring out what's really going on, it really doesn't tell you very much. So I sort of joined UFO Sightings Anonymous, and I basically from there went on to a career of disclosure. So I got into the whole disclosure thing. When I saw it the second night, I looked at this thing flying through the sky and I said, what's going on? What is that thing? And then I thought, oh, maybe that's an extraterrestrial from another planet. And I went on this whole pursuit that I didn't know what was going on, but I figured there had to be somebody who knew what was going on. That's when I went on this disclosure mission. I went to see what the Canadian government, and I've actually just released a book, the Canadian Government UFO Story, which has just been released, which I talk about from 1950 to 1954, what the Canadians were doing. I went on there. That led me to Dr. Eric Walker, a former president of Penn State University, and he led me to the president of the United States. And I went on this whole mission from 1975 to 2012, where I sort of tried to figure out, like, high level people, what does Jacques Vallée know? What does Puthoff know? What does Eric Davis know? What does Kit Green know? And I would listen very carefully to try to figure out, somebody's got to know what's going on here. And then I had this 2012 incident, and everything just sort of shifted around, and that's where we go next. One of the things I did learn, this still hasn't got that much publicity, and that is this whole idea, this is where it starts, is I was already given the hint in 1950. The Canadians were told this is this famous top secret memo the Canadians had. Matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States. Flying saucers exist. Their modus operandi is unknown, but concentrated effort is being made by a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush. The entire matter is considered by the United States authority to be of tremendous significance. In 2012, this came to me, where it came into my head, and it was the next line, and that was this idea that high-level officials were also investigating along a number of lines which might possibly be related to the saucers, such as mental phenomena. So that means that in 1950, the American government told the Canadian government through official sources that mental phenomena may be involved. That's extremely significant because in 1950, there was nobody really talking to aliens. Adamski and Williamson and these guys didn't come forward until a couple of days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb in 1952. In 1950, there was really nobody publicly talking about beings. So how did they know that this mental phenomena was involved? That was one of the main things I discovered. And in 2012, it came to me with absolute certainty, including a number of other things, which I'll talk about later. This is the other thing that really surprised me, is that one of the people that I had actually had a meeting in, Tyler D. I had a meeting with him in 2013. Ryan Bledsoe, who's the son of Chris Bledsoe, who's a very prime experiencer who I've had a lot of contact with since 2012, talked about this fact that he had been told by this fellow who I also talked to, insinuating that time travel was, they had some. I had talked to this guy in 2013. I came up with the same conclusion, that he was sort of hinting to me that we may have that. That was one of the biggest discoveries that I had, that when it came to anti-gravity and all kind of stuff, it always seemed to end up in a dead end. But whenever you started looking at this whole thing about time travel, about portals, all this kind of stuff, there always seemed to be something at the end of the tunnel. That was one of the big things. This is one of the most important things, I think, when it came to me with disclosures. People are always looking at this, and this has to do with the fact that not only we are disclosing, that the government is trying to disclose, or we're trying to figure it out or whatever, but there's alien disclosure as well, or whatever you want to call it. I call it the intelligence, people will call it alien, whoever is behind this circus. And what you see is that it has not been uniform all the way through. 1895, 1897, they're flying around in wooden ships. Then it stops, and then they go to Foo Fighters. My father was in the Canadian Air Force. His boss at the Canadian government, when he went to the Canadian government as a pilot, had a Foo Fighter sighting. And Foo Fighter sightings are these little balls on the edges of the planes. So it moved from wooden ships to Foo Fighters, then went to green fireballs. Then they switched it up and they went to the Adamski crafts with the balls under it. And then in 61, then suddenly you have all these grays start to appear, and this idea of hybrids. And then you go to triangles and you go to orbs. And what I realized going through the years is that it has not been unanimous. And this is one of the problems with UFO sightings is when you want to put all the UFO sightings into a database, what you're going to get is a database that keeps switching every couple of years when they switch this whole thing up, and they seem to be changing as they go along. It's like you're watching them turn the pages of a book as they go through the thing, that it's not the same sightings as it was back then. And I always point this out to people. I say, I was started in 1975. And if you think that what happened in 1975 is happening now, give your head a shake. It is absolutely a completely different world. There was really nothing really the same. In those days, we had ground traces. Now we don't have ground traces. In 75, we believed UFO sightings were random. We don't no longer believe. We have this idea that if you have UFO sightings, you could be a lifer. You've had this phenomena your whole life. And so this is this whole idea that I think we have to keep in mind, is that the other side is making some sort of disclosure movement as well. It's playing the same game that we are playing. So I went to the sightings versus sightings. I went to experiencers. And I have always said that if we were going to figure out the UFO phenomena, we have no way to figure it out unless you talk to the people who are actually interacting with the phenomena. You can look at all the lights in the sky you want, and it's going to just basically tell you something's going on. But if you really want to know what's going on, I maintain that you've got to talk to the people who are interacting with the phenomena. This is what the official Lakatsky is in this latest book. Here's what he says. And furthermore, this was about how UFOs might fit into the realm of what we might consider the paranormal. On various unknowns, nuts and bolts types craft flittering around the sky over military bases and facilities would never get us to the heart of a much larger and complicated mystery. You're going to be hunting for aliens cruising by from now until doomsday, and you are never going to solve anything. And that's this idea that we have to get past the sort of the nuts and bolts and the sighting things to figure out this is a much more complex mystery, and it involves the paranormal. So I would start to poke the bear to get into this idea of looking at other things that might be related that people would consider woo-woo stuff. And it was when I started going down this road that everything started to make a little bit of sense. But most people don't care. Most people are into nuts and bolts. They're into how do we make money out of this thing? And that's fine. So my path was a little bit different. I will use the word alien from time to time because people know what you're talking about. It's the same as I always use UFO instead of UAP because I believe you should use stuff that people on the street will know what you're talking about instead of making up new terms. But I would basically call this the intelligence. Whatever this is, more I go on, the more I sort of question the alien part. But I do absolutely believe this is an intelligence. It may be the intelligence behind the universe that we are dealing with. And so we'll leave it at that. Anybody who believes strictly the ET thing, I always say you have to look back at the sightings and go back to the 1890s. And the fact that these people who were interacting with these wooden ships, and they would ask these guys where you were from, and the people would say they were from Mars. And so I say, if you seriously believe that this is alien, did these wooden ships fly in through the vacuum of space from Mars on wooden ships? And we would say, no, absolutely not. And that's what I'm saying. You have to realize that the phenomena is changing. It's changing its sightings. It's changing the way it's presenting itself. And it's way more complex than people think it is. I'm about to do interviews. I've done 3 books on messages that were given to me by beings where they end up being books. And I've got another one. These are called The Beings. There are 2 women in London, England, who were interacting with these. And basically, when the ET question was asked of them, they came to me. They wanted me to do a book. So we're starting the interviews next week. We've got all the questions, and we're just going to put down what these beings who have no faces or whatever, because they're basically say, we've always been here. And this is what they said to me. They said, if you want us to be ETs, we can do that if you want. We can take you to our planet. But no, we've always been here. You're the visitor. And this is this concept that you hear more and more now, is this idea that this phenomena, whatever it is, this intelligence has always been here. It may be part of the world. It may be part of the universe. And so this is something that sort of changed my mind, that I never would have believed this kind of stuff in 1975. I never believed I would go to this idea. And this is the idea. A lot of them are saying they've been here forever, and that's a long time. So it's this idea that it is part of the universe, is part of the universe or the world. Now, one of the things I've learned I learned this when I was at the university. I actually worked in the faculty club bar, and I worked with a lot of academics for 40 years. I was not a professor, but I interacted with these people on a daily basis. I knew them as people. And what I say is the UFO phenomenon, one of the key things you have to learn in the field is this is not just extraterrestrials or UFOs. You need an interdisciplinary field to look at this thing, because basically this goes across all sorts of spectrums. And here's the idea. So you'd have an academic, say a chemistry guy, but a chemistry hammer will see everything as a chemistry nail. A physics hammer will see everything as a physics nail. And that's what the problem we have is we decide that we're going to get one person who's going to solve this thing, and they're all stuck. And I know from academics that they're stuck in their little thing. If you're an expert on some sort of aspect of biochemistry, you do all your reading. You don't do any reading. You can't fix a toilet. You can't fix your car. You're very focused on one particular aspect. So you have to go across the field, because this involves a lot of disciplines that have to be looked at. And people say that's not true. So I say, okay, let's take this. We've got cardinals. So you can take a cardinal. Let's put a cardinal in front of UFO to do UFO investigation to solve the mystery. And everybody say, no, we're not going to use a cardinal. Come on. What does a cardinal know about UFOs? He's been a cardinal for 42 years. We're not going to let him run the thing. But we do, in other aspects, allow some particular field to take control of the UFO thing and run it. It has to be across the board, because when you start looking across the board, you see all sorts of aspects from different fields that start to answer questions of what we're actually up against. We did that one already. And when you see this thing, so you take a look at what's happening. This is this latest book, this Skinwalkers at the Pentagon book, and you see who they were using. So you see they've got all these people, and it's basically physical material, biochemistry, molecular biology, genomics, and basically it's still the physical world. It's saying we're going to look at this thing as nuts and bolts, and you'll see nobody here on consciousness. You'll see nobody here on all these other aspects of spirituality or consciousness or whatever. It's looking at it straight nuts and bolts. Let's figure this thing out. Let's grab these little buggers, pull them out, put them in cages, and let's grab the engine and let's make some money from this thing. And it's this physical view of how we're going to solve this problem. The problem is much more complex than nuts and bolts. Anomalies is one of the things I learned, that anomalies are very, very important. Anomalies are how you discover stuff. So people will see an anomaly, whatever it is, it doesn't make any sense. This can't happen in the physical world, and these kind of things. And basically, it's the anomalies that are going to teach you what's actually going on. We have the idea that we have all these blocks. As I said before, we've got it all figured out. We just got one more block. And basically what I was told and what I discovered in my research is that we've got all the blocks are wrong. We've got a lot of blocks that are wrong. We've corrected the one that the world is flat. We've corrected the one about the sun going around the earth, that the things are solid, that we're not at the center of the universe. But there's a lot of blocks that we still have wrong. So the anomalies are critically important. To realize the anomalies are what you need to study, the really weird parts of the UFO experience, because that's what tells you, hey, you may not be right. You think that's how it works. If it worked the way you thought it worked, nuts and bolts ufology, then you would not have an anomaly. The reason you have an anomaly is because one of your building blocks is wrong. You've got something wrong. And when you figure out what your building block that is wrong, you'll figure out the anomaly, and then you'll be able to advance and have your patent and get rich and figure this thing out. You have to evaluate the fact that the anomalies are extremely important. Even Colm Kelleher said this. We don't study aliens, we study anomalies. They are the same things. They are the same thing to a lot of people's minds, but not our minds. And that's why I believe that the people went to Skinwalker Ranch is not because of UFOs. It was because of all this weird paranormal phenomena that was happening there. And it was the idea, if we can figure out how do you put 4 bulls inside a trailer, how do you rip down camera equipment in view of another camera that doesn't pick it up, how do you do this, how do you do that, apports, manifestations. If you can figure out these anomalies, then we're going to get somewhere. It's the anomalies that tell you where to go next in science. This is this OSAP thing. And I say it was basically to look at Skinwalker Ranch as anomalies rather than the UFO thing. Now, the field is another thing that I discovered was very important. And I've done a couple of books on this. Desta Barnaby and I did a book called Contact Modalities. And I did a book called Inspired, The Paranormal World of Creativity, where I look at inventions like art, music, Nobel Prizes, major inventions and stuff like that. And this idea that there's a field and that you use a contact modality, use a way to get out of the conscious mind into this field, and you can grab material and bring it back into the field. And this is an extremely important thing, because I believe that whatever the intelligence is connected to this field or lives in this field. Now, here's a video that I'm going to play that is inexplainable without the idea of the field. Tell me where this guy is getting this information.
I want to know what day October 1st would fall on in the year 3000, or what date the third Wednesday of June in the year 10,003 would be. Well, it's easy if you have a computer and the computer's been programmed properly. If you don't, there's always George Finn. He can give you the day if you give him the date, or the date if you give him the day, going back to the year 1 and up to, it would seem, infinity. George has the most common of the savant's gifts. He's a calendar calculator. He's 43 now, a patient at the Bronx Psychiatric Center's Rehabilitation Center. What day of the week was August 13th, 1911?
Sunday.
What day of the week was May 20th, 1921?
Friday.
What day of the week is February 3rd in the year 2068?
That will fall on a Friday.
What date was the third Saturday in October in 1945?
It was on the 20th.
What day of the week was May 30th in the year 1?
May 30th, the year 1 was on a Wednesday.
This is remarkable, George. You got every one of these right.
Right.
What makes his talent so extraordinary is that with his limited intellectual capabilities, he cannot multiply even the simplest numbers. I'd like to try some math questions, if you don't mind.
No.
Some arithmetic. Can you do 3 times 2?
3 times 2 is it 7, is it?
Or how about 5 times 7?
5 times 7 might be 50.
Now, when it comes to contact modalities, you see that this guy is able to pull this out of the field, and there's no way he's calculating. And there are a lot of these savants around that are able to do this kind of stuff. When we start looking at the UFO phenomena, we get into this idea of the implicate and the expletive order, that there is material. We're in a world, but there's another world that we can't see that has material. If you take a look at the UFO experiencer, the Edgar Mitchell free survey data, they discovered that 40% of the people who answered the question said at one point during their experience that they knew the answer to everything in the universe. Now, if you're going to make up a story, that's not something you want to put in your story. And the near-death experience people did their survey, and they determined that people answering their question, 31% of them said at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. When we get to Bashar, who's an alien channel that a lot of people use, he uses an expression I like to sort of quote. He said, "We come to you in your dreams because now you're in our world." And that's this idea that the phenomena seems to live outside of our normal time and space, and that through a contact modality, you're able to make interaction with them. But we are normally stuck in this conscious world of time and space and this kind of stuff. This is one of the more important slides I think I have. John Mack said, it manifests in the physical world, but not part of it. Now, I did an interview with Leslie Kean, and Leslie Kean is the famous New York Times reporter who did the story on the whole government cover-up thing in 2017 for UFOs. But she's more famous to me for a very important story. She worked with Stuart Alexander. I did an interview with Stuart and her, and I got Leslie to tell the story about the hand. So we have this experience in UFOs where you have intelligences, beings that come into the physical world and then seem to go back into their world. Well, Leslie saw this in her experience where she had this hand appear on a number of physical seances with Stuart Alexander. And I got her to get into great detail. Are you sure, Leslie? And yes, and the hand was real. And she touched the hand. It sort of appeared from this sort of a watery thing that came up on the table. And it appeared and she could feel it and it was warm and she could feel the knuckles and she could feel the skin. And she said it was as real as any hand she's ever felt. And then the thing would bang on the table and go and sort of dematerialize. And that, I think, is what we're looking at, is the phenomena that can come into the physical world and then go back again where it came from. This is Chris Bledsoe. This is an experience where he has this, he's being regressed by a guy from Harvard University. Where is their home? Chris said, no place we know of. Dimension just a second away whenever they want to be here. Surrender is a key one. I won't get much into it. It's a key thing that I think involves everything, all the different modalities. Surrender is the only rule. Believe me, surrender is the only rule. And this is this idea. Why do intelligence wake people up, scare the living daylights out of them in their bedroom, and then tell them to go back to sleep again? This is this idea that they're in all sorts of contact modalities. You'll find a trauma thing, the dissociation, that once a person dissociates, then you can move into the other field or to a higher vibration or whatever is going on there. And you see that in psychedelics, you see that in the Bankston healing method. And as I mentioned, in the alien encounters, it was always questioned to me was, why would beings wake people up, scare the living daylights out of them, and then tell them to go back to sleep again? To me, this has always been a chess game. So when I look at things like that, I always try to figure out why it's like an anomaly. There's something weird going on here. Why is this guy moving this weird chess piece? Why is this going on? It has to be happening for a reason. So when I look at the UFO experiencers story, I always look at the weird parts of the story, because that's where I think the answers lie. Oneness versus separation. I maintain oneness is the key message of all the experiencers. It's the number one thing that people are talking about in terms of the message. The Edgar Mitchell Free Survey, 54% of all experiencers said they were talking about oneness and love, which wouldn't make any sense if you were talking to an alien. Why would he talk to you about oneness? That makes no sense. But that seems to be the main thing. And that's this whole idea that everything is one, everything is connected, and that when you start to separate things, that's when things start to fall apart. This is actually how the United States of America started. Here's the 13 colonies. This is the original dollar that was used, and you can see the 13 things all connected, and the statement, we are one. It was also on the penny. And now you see the division. You have state versus state. You have color versus color, religion versus religion. And you see this sort of separation. But it all started with this oneness idea. The hitchhiker effect, you see this in terms of the fact that this is a sort of non-time and space. It's moving around. And you see things happening thousands of miles apart that may be connected. And the one story that I can relate is in the Skinwalker book, where they give this briefing to the high-level Homeland Security people. It's a 3.5-hour briefing to scare the living daylights out of these Homeland Security guys. They don't sleep at night. And the same night they give that briefing, this very traumatic end of the world type briefing, they have two incidents, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast, or one at Skinwalker Ranch, one on the East Coast, where these sort of negative things break out at exactly the same time. And that's this idea that everything may be connected in time and space. Here's Ernst Schrodinger. So it goes not just to the crazy UFO people. This is quantum guys, the guys that started the whole quantum physics thing. The total number of minds in the universe is one. In fact, consciousness is a singularity phasing within all being. So it may sound crazy, but the quantum physics people figured this out as well, this singularity, that everything may be consciousness, everything may be all connected at a very deep level. In the Bible, in Matthew 25, Jesus even talks about this, whatever you've done unto the least of these, my brothers, you have done unto me. And he talks about whatever it is, whether it's refugees or poor people or people in prison or people who are sick. He said, whatever you've done unto the least of these, my brothers, you've done unto me. And he gets very adamant about this, and the disciples can't figure this out. It's connected in this thing. It doesn't make any sense. You've never been sick. How do we know? And he actually gives them the warning, which you can go. He's pretty upset about what will happen if you don't do this. This is this idea of everything is connected at a very basic level. So when you get to the UFO thing, the oneness thing, how did it get here? So if it's all one thing, if it's all here now, it's all one thing, how did it get here? Well, it may not be as complex as we think it is. We make it complex because we think there's this time and space element that they have to overcome. How does telepathy work? Maybe it's all here now. There is no going there. You just tap into the field and you can pick up what your neighbor's thinking because it's all in the field. Everything's in the field. And where do we go? This is getting more and more discussion about this in terms of the abduction thing or DMT or OBEs and this sort of thing, is where do we go when we have these experiences? Are we actually going outside our body? Are we actually going anywhere? Or are we just moving to a different vibration? And that comes down to this thing about the people being scared to death, the being paralyzed, this fear and the feeling of vibration changing, and then suddenly they're in another matrix reality. That is like a sort of a dream sign, which I'll get into in a minute, that gives you the idea that those are the things that you should watch. They're telling you what might actually be going on. Chris was asked again in this regression, where is their home? No place that we know of. Dimension, just a second away whenever they want to be here. Here's Ron Johnson. He's an experiencer out of Utah who's documented since the 1960s all his encounters, most of them being out-of-body experience encounters. He's one of the 50 people that I've talked to that fly the craft. And he was asked when he was in the chair, they said, where would you like to go? And he said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. They said, hang on. He said there was 1 second of intense G-force. And he said the window was open. There was the Milky Way in the distance. 1 second. Here's what Kit Green was indicating to Jim Peniston. The focus, this is Jim Peniston talking, the focus of what he and the other people he was working with seemed to be what is to obtain and develop. How does this technology enter our reality and then leaves as quickly as it entered? So this is the idea that it's popping in and it's popping back out rather than flying from here to there. The oneness thing comes up over and over again in all sorts of mystical literature and all sorts of UFO literature. Here's Bashar. The one is the all and the all are the one. Here's Brett Oldham, who was an experiencer, wrote the book called The Children of the Greys, was not a friend of the Greys. He absolutely hated them. He said he would have done vicious things to them if he had been able to get out of the freezing, being paralyzed. And he asked the tall gray at one point, he said, let me ask you a question. What's your concept of God? And he said, the guy said, we are one with the one who is all. And Brett said he was so floored by what he'd been told, he had to sit down. This is Paul Selig. You cannot be the light and hold another in darkness. And this is this concept that he has, that everything is divine and you cannot separate something from the divine, that we are divine and you're not divine. It's all divine. It's all part of the same thing. And when you put something into darkness, it takes you into the darkness with it. This is Edgar Cayce. This is going back almost 100 years. The first lesson for the first 6 months should be one, oneness of God, oneness of man's relationship, oneness of force, oneness of time, oneness of purpose, oneness in every effort, oneness. Einstein even said, a person's experiences life as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical illusion of consciousness. Our task must be to free ourselves from this self-imposed prison and through compassion to find the reality of oneness. This goes into time and space. We have this idea about time and space. And one of the things that you get when you do a lot of UFO research is you start to realize this may not be exactly what we thought it was. And yet when you go into the dream state, we say, well, there's no time and space. And yet when you go into the dream state, this has actually been done at Stanford University in the Dream Lab, where they were working on lucid dreaming, is that people would say, for example, if you have a near-death experience, you're going down the tunnel. Well, the tunnel is a long tunnel. So there is a space and there is sort of a time, because it's taken me a long time to go down the tunnel. The same as when they did the Dream Lab experiments, where they would put people in there and they would say they learned how to get lucid. Then they could send a signal by shifting their eyes back and forth 4 times. They were on an EEG. The people in the lab would know they were lucid in the dream. And they would say, give us a sign that and count to 10 and then give us another sign. They ran these experiments. The time in the dream world was exactly the same as the time in the real world. So there's time and space in the dream world, in the lucid dream world, and in the out-of-body experience world. But where are you? Are you actually in time and space? You're in your mind. We may all be in the mind. And that is sort of the point, is this idea that time and space gets mixed up. This is an extremely important one. This is where I talk about this idea where when I look at the UFO experience, I look at the weird things. Like, this shouldn't be happening. The anomalies. Why is this happening? And this is this whole idea, are we still in Kansas? So when you have the dream experience, we had an experience with a Royal Canadian Mounted Police, federal police officer who we had an interaction with last year, who wanted me to go and investigate with Aboriginal reserves in and around the big city of Winnipeg, where I live, because they wanted to end this explanation of the shadow figure with the dream hat. And I've asked a lot of people when they have these shadow figures that they see, did he have a hat? And people will say, yeah, he had a hat on. And it's like, well, so if this is from the devil or from hell or whatever, does it rain in hell? Why do you need a hat? Why does a dream figure or a shadow figure need a hat? And you start looking at this and you go like, maybe there's something else going on here, because it shouldn't have a hat on. This is when I talk to experiencers, when people talk to them on the ship and they ask them a question, were you probed? Did it hurt? Were you scared? I ask them a question. I said, was there any dead people on the ship? And the people will always say they're very upset. These dead people, their relatives, their dead dogs are showing up. This should not be happening. If it's a physical nuts and bolts world, this should not be happening. This is telling us something that will tell us what's actually going on. The main question I always ask them, I'll cut them off as soon as they start talking. You talk to an alien, you're on board a ship and you're talking to a being? Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question. Do you have any clothes on? And then the person will always go, or usually go, no, I don't think he did. I've never thought about that before. And that's the whole thing. It's like a dream sign. We go through the dream and this weird thing happens in a dream. We don't even think about it. So the people will say, no, I don't think I had any clothes on. And then I say, hey, did you have any sex organs? And they go, no, I don't think so. No, I don't think I had any sex organs. No, I don't. And this is the idea. Like this, there's something going on that's saying, hey, take a closer look. And so you have this thing where you have ghosts always appear as clothes on, and aliens quite often appear naked. Like, so why are they coming naked? And then I'll ask them, did the alien ever get any older? And I've never had anybody who said yes. Yeah. Everybody always says, no, I never got older, but aliens live a long time. And they try to justify this. And then you have these other bizarre things that if you're going to make up a story, and whether it's a near-death experience, out-of-body experience, people will describe this, and the people on board the ship will describe the same thing. They'll say they suddenly had 360-degree vision. Well, if you're going to make up a story, you're not going to make that. And the thing is, you see it in this interdepartmental thing, is when you go across the fields, you see it in out-of-body experience, you see it in dreams, you see it in near-death experience, and you see it on the ship, the same bizarre element. Or the other element is bigger inside. Talk to Chris Bledsoe, talk to Terry Lovelace. They said all the things about 30 feet across, and then I went inside and it was the size of a football stadium. When I went to Ron Johnson, he was taken to the spirit world. He's with his dead mother walking around in the spirit world. And she took him into this temple thing in the spirit world. And he said, I walked in and he said, it was like huge inside. It was like way 10 times bigger inside than it was outside. And I said, hey, that's what Chris Bledsoe said about the UFO. So the question is he in a spirit state or is he on a UFO? And you start seeing these crossovers, and these are signs. These are dream signs that they use in lucid dream, that when you pick up the sign, that's how they teach you to do lucid dreaming in the lab. You pick up the weird things that happen in your dream. You take a dream journal. You record all the weird things that shouldn't be happening. Then when you're in the dream, you go, oh, that's one of those dream signs. This shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't be floating around. My dead father shouldn't be here. And you suddenly get lucid and you're able to figure it out because you pick up the dream sign. This is what we have to do, is we got to realize these things are telling us something that is indicating the story is a little bit more than just going along with the story that people are telling. Again, here's this naked thing. This is even back in the 1890s. This from the St. Louis Post Dispatch. Beautiful nude woman and a bearded man, also nude, on an 1895 ship. So even back then, these aliens were coming and they were naked. And it's like, my question is like, what's going on? here you have this a slide that I've got. You can take a look at the one on the left side, and you see this thing when you start looking at the grays didn't appear till 61. So if you look from 47 to 61 at all the humanoid reports, you see all these really weird humanoid reports, and you see the one on the bottom left-hand corner is quite common. It's the being with the space helmet on, and he's got a little thing and a hose going down into something on his back, like the 1940s idea of science fiction and stuff like that. And you see that we are part of what we're seeing, that the being that you're seeing may have a lot to do. And even John Mack said that to Bud Hopkins during a debate in Boston. He said, Bud, it's really weird. He said, you're getting all the real bad ones, and I'm the psychiatrist here. You think I'd be getting all the real bad ones. I'm getting all the spiritual seeking ones. And maybe that has more to do with you and I. And this is this idea, it's this idea that we may be part of the phenomena we're looking at. Here's Barney Hill's alien on the right-hand side from 61, and he's got a hat on. Like what are Zeta Reticuli? They got a baseball team on Zeta Reticuli. These are like dream signs that tell you, hey, pay attention. This is not what you think it is. This may not be the physical world the way you think it is. It's giving you a clue, and it appears in all sorts of these sort of paranormal type phenomena. Randomness is something that I sort of started to drop. And this is how it started for me. And I think I have here Jacques Vallée talking about how it started for me. This is the sighting, I think, that got me going. Charlie Red Star was the object I saw. I had no interest. The only reason I went out there was because everybody was seeing this thing. And I said, well, okay, let's go out. We didn't go out for 3 months. And then this video got caught. And as soon as this video got caught, I went out. Here's Jacques Vallée talking about the sighting that got me involved.
May 1975, Manitoba, Canada. Unidentified flying objects have been reported over the small town of Carmen. The objects have been seen by many witnesses over a period of several weeks. May 13th, 1975, cameraman Alan Carr of station CKY in Manitoba photographs 2 separate sightings over Carmen in front of 4 witnesses. The first sighting occurs.
Now, this afternoon, Sarah Cosme is going to talk, and she's going to also talk about an experience where people started coming to her, and the idea that this wasn't random, that what's the chances of all these people? And you'll have to listen to her presentation. It gets in this thing that the world may not be as random as we think it is. So this experience that Jacques Vallée talked about, it's not quite, when I interviewed all the people on the crew and the guy that shot it and stuff like that. And basically what it came down to was, it was 1 sighting, not 2 sightings. And what was happening was the object was on the ground. The crew the night before had almost got it. And then the news producer told them, we're not paying for any more overtime, you crazy people. We're not going to do this UFO thing. And this crew went out on their own. And so the guy was looking through the camera. The object was 8 miles away. We knew exactly where the object was, where the camera was. And guys on the ground were trying to surround this thing. And he said, they almost got it last night. So he said, the next time this thing glows up, I'm going to shoot the camera. And as the thing glowed, he shot the camera and it jumped into the air. It jumped in the air exactly the same time he pushed this trigger. And it was like 30 years later, I'm going, hey, that wasn't random. There's no way that happened randomly. And so he got this object jumping into the sky, and it fits almost into the Nimitz thing. And this comes down to the whole thing of this UFO disclosure thing. What is the biggest problem that we have with the paranormal and UFO research? And that is funding. One of the things I sort of looked at that may be a possibility is that the UFO phenomena really doesn't care who investigates it. It just wants us to realize that there's more to the world than what we think it is. And that basically they may be actually harassing the military because they realize the military's got all the money, and the military is going to do research. And in the end of the research, we're going to discover that there's this bizarre aspect to the world that we really don't know about. And the only ones that have the money. So the idea is they may be harassing the military. Now, here's the very slide. And this is how it ties into my sighting from 1975. So the Nimitz, these objects were sitting around for basically a week. And let's do this. So they shut down nukes. This is how they do the whole thing. They're shutting down nukes. They're flying within inches of air planes. They sat for a week around the Nimitz incident. So they were sitting there waiting, and it was like, come on, Zogar, turn the high beams on. They can't see us. I mean, what's going on here? Come on. And then suddenly they see us, and then what do? They send Zogar, hey, Zogar, the F-18s are coming. Go under the water, make some big bubbles there. And they go, okay. And he makes these big bubbles, and the pilots are all amazed, and there's bubbles, and these objects are making the thing. And then the main thing they do is they drop from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second. Here's how it ties into 1975. In 1975, what got me out there in May of 1975 was this film. I never would have gone if they had not shot this film, because I had no interest in UFOs. And what happened there was it went, if you see the actual frames of film, and these films all disappeared. J. Allen Hynek came and got 2 copies. There's the guy told me he wasn't going to make a copy because every time he made a copy, these films would disappear and stuff. I had a copy for a number of years, and of course my copy disappeared. But basically what happened was there was 3 frames of film. So if you look at the film that was shown here, you have the first frame, it's on the ground. He pushes the trigger, the thing jumps into the air. There's a flash frame. The second frame, the second 1/24th of a frame, there's this giant flash frame where the whole horizon lights up. There's 2 humps of light on the horizon. And in the third frame, it's at the top of the frame. So it's 8.25 miles away, and it goes from the bottom of the frame to the top of the frame in 1/12 of a second. One of the estimates, and we didn't do the mathematics, but one of the estimates I heard back then, it had gone from the ground, sitting on the ground, to 5,000 feet in 1/12 of a second. So it's doing the same thing. So what's it doing? Like, is this a pre-abduction maneuver? What is Nimitz? What is the Nimitz thing doing? Why is it dropping from 80,000 feet down to sea level? That in Canada is called showing off. It's like, watch this. It's the bizarre anomaly. All UFO stuff, all paranormal stuff has this bizarre, I call it the theory of wow. People will call it the trickster phenomenon. I call it the theory of wow. Why do we not have lights on our planes, and they have lights on so you can see them? They want you to see them. This is all about going, wow, what the hell is going on here? And that's what they did. There makes no other sense why they would drop from 80,000 feet down to sea level, is they wanted to get the attention. And then everybody starts to investigate it. And in the end of the investigation, we're going to realize all these other significant details that have nothing to do with nuts and bolts and UFOs and stuff like that. It has the idea of how does reality actually work? That's where we're going with this thing. Here's another one that seems to be Lakatsky goes to Skinwalker Ranch. He hears about this. They're reading the Skinwalker book in the Middle East around the pool and stuff like that. And he says, oh, I got to go to this place. I got to see the Skinwalker Ranch thing. And he gets through Reed and through Bigelow, and he gets to go on the ranch. He's on the ranch for 45 minutes. Lakatsky, who runs he's a DIA, and he wants to investigate all this paranormal phenomena. And this object, which he says most closely describes what he saw, which is on this Tubular Bells music album. This thing appears in behind the people he's talking to at the table in the kitchen, and it's hovering there, and he looks away, he looks back, the thing is still there, and it's just hovering, and it stays there for 30 seconds and disappears. Now, what are the chances that that thing just suddenly appeared when Lakatsky got there? To me, when I look at it, I always look at it from the phenomena viewpoint, is the phenomena is saying, welcome, doctor. It's about time you got here. We thought you'd never arrive. And so they show this display, and the story gets out. And the more the story gets out, the more people talk about consciousness, to talk about the weird things. And the more we talk about the weird things and the consciousness, the more we realize something weird is going on, and we start looking at the proper things that we need to look at. Here's another example. Kenneth Arnold had the sightings of 9 objects. And I didn't realize that he had this story that 5 weeks later, he had these 20 copper objects fly at the plane. So what's the chances that you had these 2 events happening to the same guy? Because we used to think even in 75, that it was a random event. If you saw a UFO, you were considered crazy. If you had 2 UFO sightings, or claimed to have 2 UFO sightings, even the people in the UFO community wouldn't talk to you because they thought you were crazy. It was a random event. You just happened to be at the right place at the right time, wrong place. And now we realize there's more of a pattern behind it than what we think. Vibration, I think, is a very important thing when you start looking at vibration. It's this whole idea. Is it time and space, or is it vibration? Is everything vibrating? Is it like a radio, where we are all like a radio, and you're changing the frequency of the tuner, and we go to a different reality, go to a different thing, that they're just at a different frequency and they come in. Vibration comes up all the time. Albert Einstein said everything in life is vibration. Psychedelics, it's big in psychedelics. It's the whole idea that the vibration. The abduction people will talk about the fact that they know when the craft is coming. Even the story with John Alexander and Chris Bledsoe. Chris Bledsoe had flown the craft, and so he'd become one with the craft. He knew the vibration of the craft, and so he's there with John Alexander on the Cape Fear River, and he says to John, they're here. And John says, how do you know they're here? I just know they're here. They're here, John. And because he could pick up the vibration, and suddenly this thing appears in the sky and goes flying across the sky. So there's the idea there's a vibrational change at each level, this idea that there's different levels, and it's not out there. It's all here. It's all one. It's all almost like this non-locality, this idea that we're making a mistake about locality, that it's all this non-local stuff. Vakatsky said this, this is this idea where they give this briefing to the Homeland Security guys, and suddenly these two other incidents break out at the same time across the country. This is non-locality, and they realize this is significant, that the fact that these two incidents occurred at the same time that they gave this briefing, and that indicates this non-locality thing. Multiple lives is extremely important. It was one of the things I never thought I would go there, and that's this whole idea. One of the things they told me was if it's one life, it has certain rules and regulations, but if it's multiple lives, everything changes. And that's this whole idea that this may be much more complex, that we may be in the soul contracts, and that this is much more complex than just one thing. Here's Ron Johnson talking about, he's the experiencer in Utah, who flew the craft and has got this massive collection of his experiences over the last half a century. I think it has something to do with decisions made in pre-existence. I beg God and Jesus for these to stop when they first started, but after many, many prayers, they kept coming. They told me that I had no right and that I was programmed from birth for these things to happen. Chris Bledsoe, and during this experience with a Harvard psychiatrist where they regressed him, they were with me before I was born. They take care of certain people in my mind all along. I just didn't know it. So the regressionist asked them, they've been here before you were born. Were they with you in another lifetime? Yes. Before I was born, I didn't have to speak to talk to them. Consciousness is the key. This is the ultimate bottom line of this thing, that the world may be made out of consciousness rather than nuts and bolts. 20 years ago, if you had in academia, you couldn't even talk. Jill Bolte Taylor, the neuroanatomist from Harvard, who has this left brain hemorrhage and talks about this going into this other world, and her experience actually said quite clearly, she did not dare talk about it. Academia, you could not talk about consciousness. 10 years ago in ufology, you could not talk about consciousness. The world has changed. You can sort of talk about, even people in the UFO field now who don't know anything about consciousness use it because they know it's a buzzword, that this is something you've got to talk about. It's made some shifts. We are moving into the field where we're starting to realize the importance of consciousness in the world. Max Planck, the father of quantum physics, actually had this like 100 years ago. As a man who has developed his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms this much: there is no matter as such. This is where it all starts to change. Is it a world made of nuts and bolts, or is it a world made out of consciousness? This is the channeling stuff. You get what you, or this is Desta, my assistant, who channels. She's done 2 books. You get what you concentrate on. There's no other rule. When you get into the consciousness thing, then the telepathic context has to make sense, where people have mind-to-mind contact with beings, and they also have contact with lights in the sky. People will report that even though it's just a UFO sighting in the sky, they have some sort of contact. There's some sort of telepathic thing where they can sort of send signals to the craft and stuff like that. And this whole idea that crafts are conscious. Now, I'm the one that has the 50 people. I heard it in 2013. I thought the woman was crazy. She told me she was flying the craft. And I've got 50 people now, and they all say they've flown the craft, and they all will be like reading off a cue card. They'll say, I thought it was a dream. It seemed like a dream. And I touched this ball. I touched this panel, and they flew the craft. Here's Chris Bledsoe, who, when I heard he did, I said, Chris, let me interview you. Don't tell me anything. He tells the story. There was this beehive thing in the middle of the craft, and he put his hand on it. And he said, once he put his hand on it, he became one with the craft. The craft is alive. The craft is conscious. He became one with the craft, and whatever he thought was what the craft did. everybody says the same thing. Nobody has said anything different. They have panels on the wall. They have, and I've got United Airlines pilots, jumbo jet pilots. I've got United U.S. Air Force colonels. I've got everybody you can think of, and they all tell basically the same story. The craft is alive. You become one with the craft, and this is this whole idea that they may have a craft that they have that's intact, and they think they can fly it. The reason they can't fly it is you need a consciousness interface to turn the thing on. Paulo wanted to talk about a little bit about artificial intelligence. And this is this idea, I always bring up this idea of all the different computers that are all linked together to make the internet, that basically you have this situation, but until you put a consciousness into it, to either develop the electricity that you need a consciousness to develop the electricity, you need a consciousness to build a computer, you need a consciousness to build the software, and you need a consciousness to put the programs, to put the stories and stuff on the internet. If there's no consciousness, there's no internet. The consciousness is still behind it. But when you come to the craft, you have this whole idea that the craft may be conscious, that you may be using bioboards, that once you use biological material, you may be able to get this artificial intelligence that you can build crafts that are actually able to think. This is a letter that was sent to Friedman, which absolutely clearly defines what these people are telling me. I was so floored by this. I thought, wow. And it basically is the same thing. It becomes one unit. The crafts are not occupants. They're part of the craft, all this kind of stuff. And that's what the 50 people I've talked to are all telling me the same thing. So I was very amazed by this. And then Don Schmidt came and said, well, no, we knew this already. And I went, well, I didn't know it until 2013. That was the first time I ever ran up against this. And I thought the woman was crazy. And he talks about this fact that they had postulated this at 1993 already, the Roswell people, that the craft was flown through thought projection and that the crew were extensions of the craft. We also heard that the memory metal was the propulsion. Even the testers' model of the Roswell craft in 1994 had form-fitting seats. So this is this whole idea how important consciousness may be to this whole mystery, that there's this consciousness interface. Even Jacques Vallée talked about this. We are dealing with a yet unrecognized level of consciousness, independent of man and closely connected to the earth. This is this idea that the consciousness thing, when you start looking at the consciousness thing, things start to make a little bit of sense. This is psychedelics. We talk about people who did the ayahuasca. My ego was crushed, and I realized that everything was alive, conscious, and connected. So you get this not only on the UFO thing, you get it in other things, this idea that everything is connected, everything is conscious and alive. Jim Semivan, who actually was face-to-face with the intelligence in his room, actually talked about this consciousness link. How do you make sense of it when there does not appear to be any there? The phenomena seems to work on another level. Consciousness, dimensions, question mark, unknown to our science. And that's where I think we're going with this thing. You talk about Tom DeLonge. Tom DeLonge went to the Lockheed skiff. He had this encounter with Robert Weiss and the head scientist and this other guy. And the head scientist says to him, I just want to know, how do they get here? How does this thing fly? And then Tom was hanging around with Stephen Greer at the time. And he said, I think consciousness is involved. And he said, the head scientist from Lockheed said, now you're talking. And all the guy wanted to talk about for 45 minutes was consciousness. So you have it there. You have Dr. Eric Walker. And when we were talking with Dr. Eric Walker in 1991, we were asking about the control group. And he said, hey, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And the guy had no answer. He said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in by the control group. Very few people understand how it works. And then 2 years later, Jan Harzen is at UCLA. The alumni engineers are there. Ben Rich makes this famous statement about taking TET home, all this kind of stuff. And Jan Harzen had this experience at 9 years old, and he's fascinated with UFOs and wants to build a UFO. And he goes to Ben, how do they get here? How does the propulsion system work? I wanted to know my whole life. Ben turns around and said exactly what Walker said. Exactly. Let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And then Jan Harzen says, it means everything in time and space is connected. Ben Rich said, that's how it works. Gets in his car and drives away. You get into this idea Deepak Chopra, everything is an activity inside consciousness. When you start looking at it that way, that we may have the whole basic premise wrong, that consciousness creates matter, not the other way around. This is somebody who was on the other side. I think it was a near-death experience. Everything is both particle and wave. On Earth, we are more particle than wave. Over here, I experience more wave than particle. The model that we have in the physical world is no, the brain creates consciousness, but I will absolutely maintain there is no way that there's a football game playing inside the TV. There's no way. I mean, it may appear like there's little guys playing a football game. There is no game inside the TV. And Elvis is not alive in my radio, just because I can hear Elvis coming out of the radio. We understand this with radios, but in the brain, we seem to think, oh, no, there's a football game going inside and Elvis is inside the brain and there's nothing. And we're making the mistake of correlation versus causation. Now, the brain is correlated with consciousness, but it is not the causation of consciousness. This is Alvy Ray Smith, who talked about, he talks about this thing about the implicate expletive order, that we make these mistakes. We sort of assume that everything is physical and stuff. He writes a whole book on the pixel. He was the co-developer of Pixel Films, did the first film totally with pixels. And he talks about this whole thing about pixels. So we've got pixels wrong. We don't understand this idea that pixels are invisible. Pixel isn't about a blocky little element on a computer screen. Instead, one of the key points is that pixels are invisible. Rather than having a one-to-one relationship with those on-screen blocks, they're behind-the-scene data points used to conjure up a picture. Pixels are invisible, but you talk to people, they say, no, they're these little blocks. And that's the thing, is this idea, we've got the blocks all wrong. We assume our blocks are right. We make assumptions that aren't right. Pixels are one-dimensional, they're invisible. They take spreaders and they spread them and they form them into this 20 by 20, and then they build it so you have billions of pixels on your cell phone, but they're just pixels. They're invisible, they're not visible to the human eye, but everybody thinks they are. We starting to get into this. Edgar Mitchell wrote the quantum hologram. We're starting to understand this complex universe, that it may be more magnificent than we ever thought. So you start to see these papers that we're making this shift away from this nuts and bolts world. Michael Talbot wrote The Holographic Universe, playing off this thing. Michael Talbot, according to Linda Howe, said she talked to Bud Hopkins, and that Michael Talbot was one of Bud Hopkins' clients, and that this book was a download. So you have this whole idea of the holographic universe. And then you have Carl Pribram, who came up with the holographic brain theory, when he saw that holograms were using Fourier transform mathematics, which is what pixel stuff does, and what the hologram does. He realized the brain was doing the same thing, this hologram thing, and he came up with the idea of the holographic brain theory. And you see behind him is none other than Jim Semivan. So Jim Semivan knows the connection as well. This idea that it's more complex than people think it is. Here's the analogy we always get wrong: the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. What we do is, because we have left brain wants language, left brain wants to put a name on everything. The minute you name it, it's wrong. There are no nouns, it's all a verb. That's this concept. Donald Hoffman talks about this whole idea, you cannot see reality. Whatever you're looking at is an icon on the desktop. And we make this mistake. We think, this is that. And we don't realize that the reality is not really visible. It's in behind. And whatever we're looking at in the physical world is a desktop icon. And the reality is in this implicate order. It's much more complex. It's in the background and you can't see it. Spirit versus ego. I'm sort of running out of time, so I'm going to sort of skip over this. This is a big thing, and this will all be in a book. I'm writing a book on this. I have long chapters on this kind of stuff. The spirit versus the ego. This is the right brain versus the left brain thing, that in the modern world, we're very much into ego. Every sentence has I or me in it. And the ego tries to run things. So if you do these exercises, breathe in through your stomach 3 seconds, then exhale for 7 seconds, 3 seconds, 7 seconds. You'll see that after about 10 seconds, your left brain starts throwing in little ideas. Let's what color are we going to paint the room? And it wants to take control. It doesn't want to be put out of the program. Once you get the ego out of the way, that's when you can get into the field. The other one that they use is a countdown to try to knock the ego or the left brain offline. Is you take a number like 881 and you're going to sleep, then you take off 3, take off 4, take off 5, then take off 3, take off 4, take off 5. You'll get about 30 seconds in that. And the left brain is saying, nah, we're not doing this no more. Forget it. And it'll just basically, you'll either go to sleep or you'll suddenly be thinking about something else. It's the ego that's controlling this. And it wants us to believe that we are this sort of character in history and we're being violated and we're being whatever. And then once you die, then you realize you're in the Civil War and you died by a certain method. And you say, that's pretty cool. I mean, all these different ways. We die numerous times. And the idea is you are not the actor on the stage. You are playing an actor on a stage. Big difference. Complexity. David Bohm talked about this complexity idea, this idea, you have no idea. That's what they kept telling me. You haven't got a clue. You haven't got a clue. Everything you believe is wrong. It's exactly the opposite. And David Bohm talked about this thing that when we get to the bottom of the idea of quantum physics, there's just another level below that. And it's this idea that the universe is becoming more and more complex as we go along, and that we're never going to catch up. I say it's 1,000 times, at least 1,000 times more complex from my 47 years. We have no clue. And there's these disclosures going on, but we're never going to catch up with the actual thing. I've gotten more and more into the channeled material. I see the same patterns coming across in all this channeled material. This is this idea you create your own reality. This is this idea that I think is very true, that we are part of what we're looking at. There is no separation between us and what we have. This is Desta, my assistant. It is an illusion. You have made with your mind everything you see now. You know it is you, and you gain control, and you can have what you want. So it's basically the same thing as Seth. They're all basically saying the same thing. And you go to quantum physics, you say, well, that's just the crazy channeler people. Well, here's John Wheeler from Princeton, came up with wormhole theory and the black hole theory. We are not only observers, we are participants in some strange sense. This is a participatory universe. Physics is no longer satisfied with insights only into particles, fields, and force into geometry or even into time and space. No phenomena is, and this is Wheeler again, no phenomena is a phenomena until it is an observed phenomena. The universe does not exist out there independent of all acts of observation. Instead, it is some strange sense a participatory universe. We are part of what we have. Consciousness is playing a key role in whatever this UFO phenomena is and how we're interacting with it. ETs is the most complex part. I really, I'm going to leave that for the book. Basically, it comes down to this idea that we all, when it comes to aliens, I can say this, all the world's a stage. All the men and women and aliens are but actors. They have their entrances and exits, and each man plays many roles. The idea that we are playing an act on a stage, but we are not the actor. Again, this is Desta Barnaby. For yourself, for your mind, by smashing the illusion. What is real is you, your eternal self. This being creates reality based upon what you want to learn. Here's a girl who helped her publish her book. She had this in the middle of the night. Realities or illusions are part of the delusion that we have created. We are living in a delusional illusion of our own making. We are all players in this fictional theory that we perform for our creator, a muse existing for our audience. The stage is set at birth and our performance has begun. The beings basically said the same thing. It's an illusion. There is no bad or good, just experiences, even though it may not seem that way. The earthly realm is an illusion which you and all humans chose to create to comprehend the meaning of energy. Ego is illusion. We'll sort of skip over this. Remember who you actually are. You are not the actor on the stage. You are watching. And once you leave the stage, as with Whitley Strieber's wife, Anne came back to him after she died, and she said, Whitley, I am no longer Anne, but I'll always be Anne to you, which basically says, we played on stage. I was Anne. I'm on to another stage, but I'll always be Anne in the stage play that we played. This is one of the more important ones. This is Yossi Ronan, who's an experience out of Israel. He had these green beings, and this is what they told him. The way you see us is defined by you. When we visit your world, we temporarily have a physical body defined in a certain way, but it is not the only form or our original essence in our dimension. There is no need for a physical body defined in a particular way as in yours. You share the definitions of reality that are given to you, but you are not yet aware of it. Sherry Wild, one of the things I always ask people who have encounters with beings is, do you ever ask him if he was an alien? So Sherry Wild, here's what Sherry Wild said. Because Sherry Wild had the experience where she was dealing with a Zeta. And the Zeta said he was from Andromeda. And the publisher picked it up and he said, he can't be from Andromeda. He's got to be from Zeta Reticuli. He's a Zeta. And she said, well, that's kind of strange. I'll go ask him. So she asked him, she said, are you actually an alien? And Sherry Wild asked her alien, Da, who was the being she was dealing with. And he said, that would not best describe the truth of who I am. Press further, he said, he used a gray Zeta body as it is more functional than a human body. Da is saying that he is not the actor on the stage that Sherry was seeing. This is what he told her. I am what you call an etheric being. I'm a voyager of the universe, going through where needed and in service to the creator. And that's the idea. We are all etheric beings playing humans. They're etheric beings playing ETs. All the world's a stage. We are not the actor on the stage. Good and evil, I'll leave it. I have a huge chapter in the book on good and evil. I'll leave that, this part of that. And I'm going to tell these weird stories. I've got 10 minutes left. I want to tell these weird stories. Nicole Sackage and I just did a book on triangles. And the reason we got it was because there was a story that was being leaked that the U.S. military was seeing these triangles. And so Bob McGuire gave us an interview and told us two incidents where these photographs he had seen in the classified world that were floating around the classified world. And we did the interview with him. And so I said, well, let's get everybody together. Let's have some panels. And we put all these people on that had sightings. And three of them were major reporters, Billy Cox and Greenstreet from the New York Post and Spiegel from Huffington Post, all these guys that had these major triangle sightings that had got them going on the field. And I'm starting to say, well, maybe there's a pattern to this. So we do this. And one of the parts of the book that we did is we did this whole thing in the book is people who have triangles put on their wrists. And there's a lot of them. We go through a few of them. This is a Karen, who's an experiencer, a local experiencer who had it here in Winnipeg. And it was like, well, why would they put a triangle on your wrist? Now you have to read the book to see sort of the guesses that we made as to why this is being done. But basically we had this situation where I realized that Chris had during his experience. I wrote about him in Alien Bedtime Stories many years ago. I wrote his story. And he has this story where he's talking about seeing the triangle. Now, Jim Semivan had said, they created us, the same idea as the being said, we've always been here, you're the visitor, and to watch the symbols. They talk to us through symbols. So Chris Bledsoe had this symbol I'll get to in a second. Here's Desta talking. Here again, you get this channeled stuff. Desta said, the structure of the universe is set by symbols. So Chris Bledsoe has this encounter in 2007. He has the tall ones and he has these short ones that are in his yard, and he sees it as a triangle on the chest. So we put this in the book where Chris has this triangle, and you see that this triangle seems to have this important meaning. And this is from the gifting field. If you know the whole story of the gifting field, where Tyler D takes Diane Pasolka and Gary Nolan to this field in New Mexico, and they pick up all this metal and they call it the gifting field. One of the pieces of metal you'll see has a triangle on it. So it was this whole idea, like maybe there's something behind this triangle, that this is one of these key symbols that we've got to get. Now, we did the book, we put the book out, and then Nicole suddenly comes and says, guess what? I got a triangle. She had her son, had this 6-year-old son, had this sort of an inspirational message that he gave her. And she was sitting there. We posted this on Facebook, and then she was sitting on the front porch, and she was thinking about it. And suddenly she realized she had this triangle on her wrist. It lasted 15 days. It has just gone away. And so again, we have another person with a triangle on her wrist. So what's really going on here? When we posted that, Chris posted this. And he said, well, that's not official. When you get this, then it's official. And I had been shown this by Chris many years ago. And he had been given this, and some questions were asked on Facebook. And he basically said it's a one of a kind. It's 24 karat gold. And I had been shown this, and it's linked into this. It's linked into this napkin. And the story, when he showed me the medal first, I said, So what'd you get that for? And he said, I can't tell you why I got it. I can just tell you where it came from. And he showed me a mailing envelope from Camp David. So here you have the symbol again, that this medal, one of a kind, has the triangle. And this was briefed to the president of the United States, where his material was brought up there. And then I wonder, like in this latest book on the Skinwalker thing, where it's like all these evil orbs and evil aliens and whatever, I asked Chris, I said, did they actually look at your material, Chris? Did they actually look at what your material is? He's got 15,000 videos and photographs. No, nobody looked at it. And we did the panel of the orbs. We had a million photographs. We believe there are a million orbs. None of that was shown. This was not in the book. And my question is, why do we not have this in the book? Because the book and this whole intention is to scare the living daylights out of Congress, to get money out of Congress. That's why it's not in the book. The good stuff, this kind of stuff, you're not going to read about in the book. There's one thing they actually posted an article about Chris, and this is kind of a funny thing to end. Chris, this quote came where Chris said, well, he was contacted by officials and they said, well, it seems like they like you and they don't like us, but we'd like to know what it wants or what it is. So they're coming to Chris, all these high level officials, and they're trying to figure out how you got this contact, and they don't like us, but we're talking to you. And I went to Chris, I said, Chris, did they actually tell you that? And this is what Chris said. Yes, several organizations. I asked, why do you need me? They said, we see it, but it has nothing to do with us. But we want, but we know it does you. It's dealing with you. We would like to understand. So they go to Chris Bledsoe to find out and that's where it comes down to the thing. Instead of looking at the lights in the sky, you talk to the people who are having the interactions, and some high level officials have gone to these experiences and are watching them and trying to get messages from them to figure out what's going on. Now, this afternoon, Sarah's going to talk about her first book, which is this synchronistic thing where this event started to happen in her office. These women started coming in. But the second one, I had an interview with her, and this is where I'll end it. I had an interview with Sarah, and suddenly at the end of the interview, she says, I have another book she's working on. And part of the book has to do with these women that all started coming into her, and they're postmenopausal women who are having babies. And I said, what? Are you kidding me? She said, yeah, this is very strange. I said, I've got one of those. And the thing was, one of Nancy Tremaine, who had the encounter with the Greys 2 months before Betty and Barney Hill, had this experience, and it's in her book. I helped her publish the book, and I wrote the foreword to her second book. And this story is old, where she had a baby at 62 years old. She went into menopause at 39 years old. So Sarah, this is in her second book. She may not talk about it much today, but Sarah has this as well. And she's got a lot of women. So I've only got the one. And this is 62 years old. This is Nancy Tremaine. And I'll leave it at this. She was pregnant, and everybody was saying, no, you're not pregnant. You can't be pregnant. Her best friend's husband said, well, you may be pregnant, but you better stop being pregnant right now. So this is it. And everybody said, well, come on, Grant, she's just fat. And that's not. Here's her 7 months after she believed the baby was taken. Now, how many women in the audience today would like to be fat like this at 62 years old? She is not fat. This is the same woman, and she absolutely maintains. Now, I'll leave it with this. There's been some experiments done with this evil alien thing that they're influencing people, and it's all these military people that are within 500 yards. I was within 500 yards 5 times. I was not injured. These people are being injured. And what they were talking about, this experiment with Kit Green and Nolan, where they are able now to record through the immune system everything that's ever happened in your life. And they're looking at insults from UAP experiences to track when people had these experiences. I'll put out the challenge right now. I think we need a test of one of these women to see, were they pregnant at 62 years old? Because if they were pregnant, the world is about to change, because that is absolutely an anomaly. It is absolutely impossible. And if they can track it, that changes. And I guess I should go quickly, because I got 2 minutes here. I got, so here's the other thing I think is going to change the world. This is the blindfold thing. I won't get into it. It'll be in the book. It is the most revolutionary thing I have ever seen with the blindfolds. And the other one is the DNA consciousness. I've just learned that IONS is working in this field, and I'm going to try to contact people. Know I've been working on this DNA consciousness thing. Is what's the relationship to consciousness and DNA? Does consciousness create DNA or vice versa? And I'm working on this. This absolutely flips the world. If what I think is going on is true, and we can confirm this. I think we've got a test to confirm it. It will turn the world on its head. So thank you for listening, and I hope you got something out of this. You can watch it again, slow it down a little bit, and pick it up. And the book will go into great detail on all this kind of stuff. The book's about half finished right now. I did learn that I knew an awful lot more than what I thought I had learned in 47 years. Thanks for listening.